It's October 7th, 2024, and this is my final update video on Hurricane Milton before we transfer over to live coverage, which is going to start tomorrow around noon. We're going to go for 8 hours just doing pre-hurricane coverage, answering your questions. We'll have Caleb out there putting probes out, storm surge probes. We're going to have other storm chasers that we're going to be talking to in the area. Additionally, we're going to be relaying news about evacuations and that kind of thing, and it just makes a lot more sense to do that in a real-time live stream fashion than trying to put everything in a video and have it be outdated by the time it goes up. So tomorrow we're going to be live for most of the day talking about the hurricane, and then on Wednesday our final live coverage covering the landfall is going to start probably around 2 p.m. Eastern, and then we'll go until 2 a.m. or whatever's needed to cover the landfall, the storm surge, the flooding, and the tornado threat that's going to come along with Major Hurricane Milton as it slams into the western side of Florida. As I'm filming this, Major Hurricane Milton is a high-end Category 3 hurricane with 125 mile per hour winds, and the pressure's down there around 945 millibars. This is astronomically stronger than what it was yesterday, and that intensification is going to continue today. By the time you're watching this, it's probably already a Category 4 storm with 145 mile per hour winds, and that's around 2 p.m. today. As soon as 2 a.m. early in the morning tomorrow, we could have a high-end Category 4 with 155 mile per hour winds right here just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula near Progreso, Mexico. I really hope that the people down here in Mexico are watching out for this one, because this is taking a really strange approach. I don't know if this area has ever had to deal with a hurricane like this coming in at this angle and at this intensity. This is going to be a pretty bad situation for Mexico, especially if it takes a more southern track here, because it's going to be at its peak intensity right here. The official forecast is of course for 155 mile per hour Category 4 storm. However, I really do believe that this could very well be a Category 5, maybe even by the end of today, not even tomorrow, and then it could be a high-end Category 5 by the time it gets to this area, especially if it continues to strengthen in the unbelievable fashion that it has so far. But from there, it is going to start slowly weakening, okay? We do expect it to be down to 150 miles per hour as it goes a little bit farther to the east. Once it gets between the Yucatan Peninsula and Florida, as it's really starting to approach Florida, it's going to be down to 144 miles per hour, and then we expect it to make landfall, or at least be just off the coast of Florida, as a Category 3 major hurricane on Wednesday, sometime after 2 p.m. and before 8 p.m. So that's the current thinking right now. We do expect that this will still be a Category 1 hurricane in the middle of Florida around Orlando as we get into the early morning hours on Thursday, and then of course this is going to go out to sea and become a post-tropical storm. And I really don't think we have anything to worry about in the Carolinas, which is something that we kind of hinted at yesterday. The track has shifted south quite a bit. But yeah, the storm has undergone rapid intensification. It's going to continue to do so, and nothing's going to stop this thing from absolutely blowing up, except if it goes a little bit farther south. If that core of the storm does actually make landfall or actually interact with the Yucatan Peninsula here in a significant way, that could cause enough of a disruption in the flow of the storm to weaken it significantly, or at least stop it from explosively intensifying in the way that it has. So we can really hope for that. Obviously that would be better for Florida, but that would be a lot worse for Mexico. So really there's not a winning scenario here. Both places are going to get absolutely pummeled by the storm, but we're trying to think of the best case scenarios. Here's the latest experimental cone from the National Hurricane Center. As you can see, we have hurricane watches in effect for much of Florida. This includes Tampa, this includes Fort Myers, this includes the majority of the western side of Florida. Now, the hurricane watches do not include the landfall area from Helene. So I think Perry, I think that you guys are out on this one. I really don't think we can expect a landfall from a hurricane up there. We're still going to have some impacts, but this is shifting south. Tampa, Fort Myers, you guys unfortunately are under the gun for potentially the strongest parts of this storm. Here's when we can expect the arrival of some of these winds. We're talking about Wednesday at 8 a.m. We're going to be seeing tropical storm force winds at least along most of the western side of Florida. Florida. That's going to overtake all of Florida more than likely as we get towards noon on Wednesday. And if we experience any sort of tropical storm force winds on the outer bands of this storm, those will arrive in places like Myrtle Beach sometime between 8 p.m. Wednesday and Thursday at 8 a.m. So really, this is just a Florida storm, y'all. I don't think that this is going to have much of an impact on anyone outside of Florida, but the entire peninsula of Florida is going to be absolutely rocked by Hurricane Milton. But the entire peninsula of Florida will feel some sort of impacts from Milton as it goes across. Once again, the most dangerous part of this storm right now seems like it's going to be the storm surge, where unfortunately the Tampa Bay area and the Charlotte Harbor area are both in a potentially dangerous situation where we expect anywhere from 5 to 12 feet of storm surge, and everywhere in between there. I think that number could probably go up. I think that we're in our next update, especially if we continue to see the storm strengthen in the way that we have, it's very likely that we see a couple places under the gun for 15-foot storm surge. That would be absolutely devastating for Tampa. That would be, really bad for anywhere that happened, but we're going to hope that the storm surge numbers stay here and don't go up. Also, we're going to be dealing with an excessive rainfall event here. A lot of Florida, even up into southeastern Georgia, you guys are going to get an entire October's worth of rain in a day. Some places will get 2 or 3 Octobers worth of rain in a day. This is going to lead to extreme flash flooding in some places, so make sure if you live in a flood-prone area, you are prepared for that, especially if you're close enough to the coast to where maybe the storm surge is not going to cause like water inundation to your home directly, but could back up those waterways enough from the runoff to cause additional flooding problems. That's going to be a big-time deal, I think, across a lot of the peninsula of Florida. And then, of course, just your regular stream, creek, and river flooding. All right, let's take a look at these models. HAFSA is still really far north. I think that this model is the farthest north out of any of them that I've looked at. So keep that in mind. I do think that the eventual actual path of this storm will be slightly farther south than what we're seeing here. So I think that this is going to go a little bit closer to Mexico, and hopefully that will actually keep this from getting as strong as what this is suggesting. However, I do want to point out how small this is. Once again, this is a tiny little hurricane. The hurricane force winds at this point are only going to extend 25 miles outside of the center of the storm. So it's going to be hard for it to get disrupted. It has to get really close to Mexico before there's going to be any major changes to the strength of the storm. So there's a good chance that this is going to continue to intensify right up until it gets just past the Yucatan Peninsula, which is what the HAFSA model is showing here. In fact, this gets us all the way up to almost 190 mile per hour Category 5 hurricane by the time this is just to the north and west of Cuba at 11 p.m. on Tuesday. If this were the case, this would be one of the strongest storms that has ever occurred in the Gulf of Mexico, period. So this would be an unfortunate scenario because at this point, we're 100% certain that it's going to start weakening. There is no world where this continues to strengthen as it goes towards Florida. There's too much wind shear. However strong it is right here really is going to determine how strong it is whenever it makes landfall. So if it's way up there at a high-end Category 5, there's a chance that it makes landfall as a Category 3 or maybe even higher. If are only dealing with a Category 4 or a low-end Category 5 here, there's actually a chance that we only see a Category 2 impact whenever it makes landfall in Florida. So we're really hoping for less intensification by the time it gets right here. And unfortunately, one of the major factors that is going to help us there is more interaction with the Yucatan Peninsula. But at the same time, we don't want to see that. That's going to cause some devastation over here. So this is just a terrible situation for everybody involved. But a best case scenario is going to be a rapid de-intensification on its final approach to the western side of Florida. So here's what this thing could look like by 8 a.m. on Wednesday. You can see that wind field is starting to expand. And as the wind field expands, the storm surge is going to expand as well. So I want you guys to think of some of the biggest disastrous hurricanes that have ever happened. What do we got? Ivan, Katrina, those kinds of storms did the same exact thing. They were Category 5s, they were Category 4s, really strong storms out in the Gulf, and then they kind of spread out and became weaker whenever they made landfall. Hurricane Katrina made landfall as only a Category 3 hurricane, but the storm surge that came along with that was a result of the expanding wind field and all of the momentum that it had gained over the Gulf. So even though we do expect this to weaken quite significantly on its approach approach to the western side of Florida, the storm surge situation is just as bad as it would be if it didn't. In fact, it's probably worse because the weakening is also coming along with the expansion of the wind field. That is actually going to make the storm surge more of a problem than it would be if it continued to be that tiny little compact storm. So we're going to be dealing with storm surge all across the western side of Florida, but I want to bring everybody's attention to the fact that because of the unique approach of the storm from the southwest here, the worst of the storm surge is going to happen on the southern side of the storm. Okay, so if you're on the northern side of that eye wall, we are still going to see some storm surge, but the 15-foot storm surge, if that ends up happening, it's going to happen south of the eye. So if you're in Tampa, you're hoping that the storm goes south of the bay, and that's going to be best for you. If you're in Fort Myers, you're hoping that it goes a lot farther north, because honestly, I think that the only thing that could happen is if it goes any farther south than what the current models are projecting, it would be a worse situation for the Charlotte Harbor area. So a worst case scenario would be that the storm tracks like this, and that is pretty similar to what the HAFSA model is showing right now. However, this is the most northern model that we've seen, right? Everything else is farther south. So hopefully this is not what happens, but if this were to happen, this would cause a devastating storm surge in the Tampa Bay area. And just because it's on the table, just because it is a possibility, I think everybody in Tampa should be getting the heck out of there. I know that I would be. And then if this thing makes landfall as a Cat 3, Cat 2, whatever it is, it's going to very quickly weaken to a Category 1. There's a possibility that we even see this become a tropical storm at some point over the peninsula of Florida, but there's also a possibility that it, stays a Category 1 all the way over to the other side of Florida, and then it's not going to re-strengthen. It's likely not going to become a hurricane again. It's going to become a post-tropical system as it has gotten so large, and then it's just going to kind of fade out into the rest of the ocean. Here's what the radar could look like as the storm approaches. Once again, major Category 5 storm likely as it goes just to the north of Mexico here, and then you can really start to see that de-intensification process start to happen here as the eye becomes less defined, especially on Wednesday early in the morning. Things are going to fall apart fairly quickly, hopefully, as the storm approaches Florida. However, even right here around 2 p.m., some of these outer bands are going to be bringing about tropical storm force winds into the Tampa area, Orlando, all the way over into more eastern parts of Florida. And also, this is when we're going to see our tornado threat. So anybody in the front right quadrant of our storm is going to have to deal with supercells that could potentially cause tornadoes. So we'll definitely see tornado watches and warnings during this time, probably widespread tornado watches and warnings in the evening on Wednesday. And that's one of the things that we're going to cover in our pre-coverage. And then the storm surge will likely really start going on around 7, 8 p.m. Once again, this is another model. This is the HAFSB model. It's showing a worst case scenario for Tampa as that center of circulation goes just north of town. If that happens, we're talking about $1 billion. We're talking about $1 billion disaster here in Tampa or greater. So let's hope that doesn't happen. I'm going to show you some more data here in a second, but we've got to prepare for the worst, right? And then this thing really starts to unwind as this gets over the peninsula of Florida. It's going to weaken very quickly. The main threat at this point is going to be all the heavy rain and the flooding. Jacksonville, Daytona Beach, flash flooding is going to be your main thing that you've got to watch out for. Once again, those two models that I just showed you are really good during hurricane season. That's why I like to show them, but those are both high-end and far north members of all of the different models that we look at. Everything else has shifted south, okay? And the farther south that it goes, the better chance that it's going to interact with the Yucatan Peninsula in a way that won't allow it to become this 180 mile per hour Category 5 hurricane. I think that there's almost 100% chance that we see it become a Category 5 hurricane, but what we want is a 160 mile per hour Category 5 hurricane rather than 180 miles per hour, because that extra little strength there is just more that we have to rip away before it gets to Florida. So right now we expect it to go from a Category 5 to maybe a Category 3 or 2 in less than 24 hours. I think that's going to be hard. I don't know how realistic that is. I'm hoping for the best, obviously, but the weaker that storm is at its peak intensity, the better chance that that's actually going to happen. So we are dealing with a mandatory evacuation in a lot of different places. I know Fort Myers is one of those places. If I lived in Naples, though, I would even consider getting inland a little bit. Same thing for places like Sanibel Island, Coya Costa, Boca Grande, Minnesota Key, Siesta Key, Osprey. I think that you guys are some people that need to consider getting the heck out of there. Longboat Key, of course, everybody up there in Holmes Beach and Anna Maria. Everybody in close vicinity to the Tampa Bay, you should consider getting out of there as well, and that includes a lot of places right around downtown Tampa. It doesn't take much water to cause a big problem there. And once again, if the storm goes farther south, which it looks like it's trying to do that, it's not going to be as much of a problem for Tampa. But if it goes right over the bay, or if it goes just to the north, it could be a worst case scenario for you guys. And with that being said, I would even consider evacuating and taking this extra seriously as far north as Pine Island and Hernando Beach, just in case. So yeah, that's the latest. I don't want to talk too much about what's currently happening with the storm because it's going to change so much by the time you're watching this. That's why, once again, we're going to be live for, 20 hours or so over the next 36 or 48 covering this hurricane. So make sure you subscribe, turn notifications on. Follow me over there on Twitter if you haven't already. I'm going to be posting some intermittent updates over there as well. And yeah, I'm going to get to work getting everything ready for Hurricane Milton. My thoughts are with you guys in the path. I'm hoping that we won't need it, but of course the Y'all Squad is on standby, and we've got a lot of resources to help y'all out if you need it. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on those channels as well. We've got a Twitter, Facebook, and all that stuff. And of course, we'll update you here on our nonprofit's progress and what we're doing on this channel as soon as we have a plan, okay? All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.